Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I have a piece of audio that I'd like to play right out of the gate here and have a bit of a societal discussion, if you will. Certainly from a sociological perspective, and I've been watching this individual for a while, and there's a predictable outcome here, which is unfortunate, but there's also a lot of education within this particular situation that I think needs to be brought up. And a lot of people may be unfamiliar with this particular individual, and that's 100% fine. I'll introduce them as best that I can, and I'll actually let this piece of audio just kind of do the speaking for itself right out of the gate, and then I'll give you a little background on this person's social media account and the videos that they produce and the things that they catch on film and a number of other things. So, first of all, give this piece of audio a listen. This pertains to a ChudTheBuilder. That, of course, is not his real name, but that's his X handle. And what he does is he records himself in social situations, and he basically is a provocateur, so to speak, and he provokes individuals in particular settings. He also educates anybody who's watching his live streams how people behave, and unfortunately behave in particular social settings as well. And there's a flip side to that coin, which of course is when you provoke individuals in public while exercising your freedom of speech, which he does, you bump up right against a very corrupt line of what police are willing to do, but also, again, what individuals in society are willing to do. And he's been doing this now for a while, and he just got shot the other day, or at least he shot someone else in a provocateur conversation back and forth, probably with an individual who happened to be black in front of a courthouse in Clarksville, Tennessee. So he's been detained, or was detained at least for a short while, but give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
A live streamer known for posting racist videos is in custody after he said he shot a man after a confrontation in front of a Tennessee courthouse, authorities said. The shooting happened as Dalton Etherly, who goes by ChudTheBuilder online, and the man were outside the Montgomery County Courthouse in Clarksville, the Tennessee District Attorney General's office said. Both men were taken for medical treatment. Etherly live-streamed himself speaking to first responders after the incident. During the live stream, Etherly could be heard saying he shot the man in self-defense after Etherly claimed he was attacked.
He hit me, started wailing on me, even after I had to defend myself by shooting him. He's still wailing on me.
As he spoke with the first responders, he asked if he also shot himself when he opened fire. Etherly was then taken away on a stretcher with a bandage on his arm. He reportedly was treated at a Clarksville hospital. Clarksville Now reported the victim was taken by helicopter to a Nashville hospital and is in stable condition. Etherly regularly posts videos of himself using racial slurs and getting into confrontations. He has gained over 200,000 followers on X.
Be a good boy. You heard me.
In a separate incident a few days prior, Etherly was kicked out of a restaurant and arrested in Nashville on charges of theft of services, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. Etherly was granted release for the incident on a $5,000 bond, according to a judge's order.
Okay, there's a lot to get to with this, and I'm just going to refer to him as Dalton because that's his first name. And again, I find this to be interesting, certainly from a cultural and a societal standpoint with a sociological twist to it. First of all, just a quick little background. I mean, I remember taking sociology back in college, and I found it fascinating because it had everything to do with manipulation to a great extent, but it also had to do not just with manipulation and how easily people are manipulated, but when people are in particular scenarios and situations, what are they going to do? Are they going to do the right thing or are they not? And what's interesting is that they had us engage in a number of experiments, and there were a number of very famous sociological experiments from sociologists from time past, but one of them that my partner and I in the class decided to do was, and again, it was basically a very old sociological experiment, but we again did it in order to see what the result would be. And it had to do with taking envelopes that were empty, by and large, They didn't have anything in them. It's just a blank piece of paper. And you would leave them random places with a stamp on them and a return address. And the return address, again, was on the envelope. And the address on the envelope was, again, his apartment or wherever. He was basically collecting them in an effort to see, again, who would basically return the envelope, who would go out of their way to pick it up and put it in a mailbox. So we left these letters basically all over a neighboring city. And we just kind of dropped them off at random places. We would even put some right next to the mailbox. And we would number them so that we knew exactly where they were. And we would figure out exactly which ones we got back. If memory serves, we got maybe 6 out of 20 envelopes back. Point being is that when individuals would stumble across the envelope, they would look at it and then they would either throw it away or they would give it to somebody else and say, do something with this or whatever. But as it turned out, only about 6 of them, 6 out of the 20, actually made their way through the mail and then back to his apartment. God knows what happened to the rest. They were probably trashed. Either way, again, in that one specific element, it shows whether or not individuals are willing to go out of their way to basically do the right thing, so to speak, with something that doesn't even belong to them, and return it or attempt to return it to the person who it actually belongs to or who it's intended, who the intended recipient is. What the experiment, of course, showed was that the vast majority of individuals, if they did in fact stumble across the envelopes, and we made them rather obvious. I mean, we put them right outside of restaurants. We put them on a table right out in the open, put them right in front of a courthouse, things of that nature, right outside of a police station. I mean, it was rather obvious. But what it showed is that the vast majority, of course, of the letters never made their way back to their intended recipient, which was us. And then, again, what does that mean in the broader scale? It means, again, that if individuals come across something that doesn't belong to them, they're more likely to ignore it and just let it not exist anymore, so to speak, and not attempt to return it to its intended recipient. Now, that's a loose explanation of that particular study, and there have been many who have replicated it, of course, in lots of different ways. There have been TV shows that have done certain sociological experiments, of course, and the whole "what would you do if you were in this situation" kind of thing, and then they stage the entire area and socially disrupt something within a particular scenario or an environment in order to, again, record the reactions of individuals and then interview them after the fact. Regarding Dalton here, ChudTheBuilder as he goes by, I've been watching his videos for a while, and right out of the gate, my first reaction was, I understand what he's doing. I even understand the multidimensional layer of what he's doing. By going into, again, city environments or live streaming himself and recording himself interacting with these individuals, calling them names. He uses the N-word a lot, even with white people. He does a lot of very provocative stuff. But what he's also doing is he's highlighting the degeneracy that does exist within our culture and how emotionally reactive people are to just the usage of words. That if you just call someone a name, they'll go from 0 to 10 in the blink of an eye. They'll immediately become physical. And of course, he's highlighting this specifically among inner city blacks. And again, it works. It provokes them to an emotional response. But when you're watching these videos, you immediately arrive at a logical conclusion, which is someone is going to shoot him. Someone is going to fight him. He tells people he's carrying a gun. He has bear mace in his hand most of the time. And so he'll have conversations with these individuals and he'll try to, again, provoke an emotional response out of them from time to time by just engaging in freedom of speech. And instead of the individuals, again, walking away from him, and him walking away from them even, he stands his ground because he's allowed to. And then again, either the individual confronts him or they leave or they call him names or whatever. And they've even assaulted him again as he's live streaming himself. It was, I think, just last week he was in Nashville and he's just walking around kind of the bar scene there. And it was sad because you're seeing all these leftists And they're saying, again, basically what leftists would say. They're calling him a Nazi. They're calling him a bigot. They're calling him a racist, a homophobe. I mean, they're using all of these names. And what he's showing people, and I'm not agreeing with his tactics necessarily, but I understand the point that he's making. The societal point that he's making is that you can call him whatever name you want, and he doesn't become emotionally irrational. But if you say it to an inner city black, for example, and it isn't all of them, clearly, and he's even recorded that. Again, in the same situation in Nashville, a black guy came up to him and started making fun of him and knocked his cowboy hat off. And he looks at him and he goes, "You just assaulted me, pick up my hat." He goes, "I'm not picking up nothing." And then he ends up shoving Dalton, and then Dalton bear sprays him. And then the guy walks away and leaves the area. And then another black guy picks up his hat and hands it to him. He goes, "Man, I don't want to get bear sprayed. Here's your hat. That was wrong. Whatever." Dalton goes, "Thanks, man. Appreciate it." There was another, again, he was downtown Nashville, same thing. A couple of white girls are drunk out of their minds, and they're not young either. These gals are in their 40s or 50s, and they are flat drunk, and they're sitting on the ground waiting for an Uber or whatever, slurring their speech, the whole thing. He walks up to them, he extends his hand, and he says, "Stand up. Stand up." And they start to stand up, and they're still slurring their speech. He says, "What are you doing on the ground? Don't sit on the ground. That's where dirt is. That's where dirt is. That's where trash goes. Stand up and respect yourself," kind of thing. And then, of course, he starts to cut into him. And he basically says, again, "Let me guess, you're single, never married, no kids, shocking." He's highlighting the state of affairs in our country, which is sin. And it's awful. And I'm not saying that he's not, again, being provocative in some of the things that he does. He certainly is. But he has a different method of going about it that other people do, which again is fine, but it's a more dangerous way to do it, which is you interact with complete strangers in an area where you don't live. And then you just assume that people are just going to either agree with you or disagree with you politely, or if they don't agree with you politely, or they don't disagree with you politely, then violence escalates. You've heard me talk about this before, and this is called cumulative risk. You're just stacking one situation on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, where each one is individually risky. But when you compound that risk and you make that risk more complex, the end is almost always going to lead to a very predictable result. And so apparently, again, outside of a courthouse in Clarksville, Tennessee, somebody approached him. Allegedly, he probably has all this on film. He's probably handed it over to lawyers. They're probably, again, in full possession of all of it. And then we'll see what ends up happening regarding his particular case. But it's an interesting magnifying glass on society as a whole. And like I said, I don't necessarily agree with his approach, but I understand what his approach is exposing. And again, I get it. And certainly, again, not everybody would react that way. But what it's also exposing is that it's exposing a pacification of human rights that we all have. Now, you don't have the right, for example, and he was even on his X account describing the incident in the restaurant, that he wasn't being disrespectful, but that he was basically being set up, that someone was setting him up. They knew he was in town. They were, again, going to give him a seat in this restaurant, and then they were going to create a scene, and then he would react, and then they could throw him out, and then they could have him arrested. He's again claiming that he was essentially set up in the entire situation. If that's true, he should know that that's a possible scenario given what he does and how many people know who he is. Again, you would think that he would think about that he's going to get set up, and then it's not going to work out for him legally, one way or another, and it may in fact even cost him his life. There have been other live streamers who have openly said, "Kill him. Go kill him," because he's out there and he's doing things that he shouldn't do, and somebody's going to knock him off. It might as well be us. So somebody should just go out there and knock him off so that he doesn't ever do this ever again. He's not vandalizing. He's not robbing anybody. He's name calling from time to time, and he's highlighting the emotional reaction and low IQ reaction of a great deal of people, regardless of race, in particular situations when they don't have their emotions under control. Just so happens, a lot of these interactions are happening late at night, where people have been drinking or using drugs. Again, that's cumulative risk. Because you start doing that in particular situations, in particular areas, you're compounding that risk. I mean, he was in downtown Atlanta not that long ago doing doing very similar things in a gas station in Atlanta at nighttime. That's cumulative risk. So, I don't want anybody hurt. I certainly don't want him hurt or anybody else who's innocent. But at the same time, this is what you should expect. But I understand what he's attempting to do. And I get it. And he is highlighting the degradation of our society, the low IQ aspect of our society, how people don't know what their rights are, and how they get overly emotional because they get called a name that they don't like. Now, here's a particular post from an individual who goes by the Jolly Brawler, and they're describing, again, ChudTheBuilder, and they're highlighting, again, a great deal of what I just brought up also. But here's what they said, and again, it's food for thought, but it is what it is. They said, today, @ChudTheBuilder was violently assaulted by a black person and shot him. Many on the right have mixed thoughts about him, but a few things. Notice that Chud does not start the fights. He simply records what life is like in areas where public order has collapsed due to the black population. When he turns on his smart glasses and walks into a store or gas station, what does he often find? Black people being violent, loud, rude, vulgar, or destructive. He does not create the chaos, he simply documents it. But Americans have become accustomed to looking the other way, avoiding eye contact, avoiding certain stores and areas of town, and allowing this behavior to continue. Many of the complaints I hear about him center around, quote, why can't he just go somewhere else, unquote, or, quote, why can't he just be quiet and let them be, unquote. They said this is a disgusting question to hear come from the mouths of American men. Exactly how many towns, cities, stores, streets, and areas are we supposed to hand over to people who behave this way? This is modern British thinking. It is not American and certainly not Christian thinking. Because of this weakness, blacks have been able to build a parallel culture of disorder alongside civil society. In black culture, people can scream at workers, vandalize public spaces, threaten strangers, defy the law, and face little meaningful consequences. I'll take it a step further, and then I'll finish their post. One of the things that also happens, of course, is if you disagree with them in a public space, say, for example, they're a city council member, or they're a school board member, or, again, they hold some kind of an elected position. If you disagree with them, and they happen to be a leftist who also happens to be a black, particularly a female, but males do it as well, they immediately call you names. They call you a racist. They call you a bigot. They call you a white supremacist. But whites don't get overly emotional about it when that happens because it's expected. That's the expected response when you call out someone for being, again, unprofessional or engaging in illegal behavior or doing something that's stupid or vandalizing something or whatever it is. We can see that that's going to be their emotional response because that is their emotional response. But when you respond back in turn and you put it back on them, they can't handle it. It's the old I can dish it out, but I can't take it kind of thing. And that happens all of the time. And it's sad. But again, it's a snapshot of the society that we live in. The post goes on, it says, blacks can move more freely between ordered spaces and disordered ones, taking advantage of one white damaging the other. Meanwhile, when we are forced to venture into their society, we do so at great risk of assault, rape, and murder. That's an accurate point. It just is. When whites move toward white individuals, the likelihood of a crime taking place is far less than if whites move toward a black environment. That's a statistical fact. It's a criminal fact. It's basic criminology. That's just the way that it is. That's why, again, most whites, and I should say non-blacks by and large, it's not all of them clearly, I'm going to keep saying that, but you understand what I'm saying here, hopefully, is that there's a very good reason why you don't hear of many whites vacationing, for example, in urban settings or inner city settings. They just don't do it. They don't say, hey, let's take a vacation to inner city Chicago or Detroit. No one does that. By and large, nobody does that. In fact, I would go so far as to say, and it's not a leap by any stretch, the people who do it are the people who are unaware, who are not vigilant. These people, as we know, tend to be on the left side of the political spectrum. There are plenty on the right who also are not vigilant and are dead asleep as to the real world that we live in and the societal elements that exist in society. Certainly, again, from a geographic standpoint, people are far more likely to go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and have a nice vacation in a cabin. Why? Because it's civilized. Now, is there a race element to that as to why it's more civilized? Of course there is. Of course. You can't ignore that. You can't ignore the correlation between race and culture. The sad part, too, of course, is that the reason that the cities are in the shape that they're in is because they're inhabited by leftists. Very few conservatives live in the city or around a city, and there's a good reason for that, because cities are shitholes, and most people know that. But who runs those cities? Politically, who tends to run them? And then, of course, who do they give handouts to? What kinds of people, what races of individuals, what cultures of people are they giving handouts to? It's rather obvious, is it not? The Post goes on here, and they said the following: so, you can disagree with Chud. You can criticize his language, his tactics, or his behavior, but he is exposing something real, a rotting wound, and a ticking time bomb at the center of the country. He's exposing a problem to which many are blind because they have never lived in areas heavily populated by blacks. He is forcing people to look at what happens when disorder is excused, tolerated, and protected from criticism. Where many would turn away, he records it. Pray for him, unquote. Again, there are endless individuals, too, who, as I said before, have called for him to be killed. That's not the solution either, because what does that do? It ends up justifying the point that he's making, which he's making a valid point. Again, people can disagree with his tactics and the way that he goes about things. But what he's also exposing is something that is happening, of course, at the corporate level as well. This is exactly why McDonald's, the fast food chain, has gotten rid of self-serve free refills of their soft drinks. This is exactly why Publix, the grocery store, has gotten rid of or is in the process of getting rid of their ice dispensers. It's because there's a culture and a race of individuals who are stealing. Again, these videos exist all over the place. They're all over the place. A person, again, at this stage of the game, would have to be deaf, dumb, and blind to not understand why they lock up particular items in Walgreens and CVS behind plastic boxes, behind a lock, and then other products are not. It's because they know which items get stolen by those races of people. Those companies do actual studies, internal studies, on who steals, what products are being stolen, and why is it that these people, this group of people, or this race, or this age, or whatever, are stealing these products and not stealing others. It's because some people go into particular stores and they buy things that happen to cater to their race or to their interests of that particular race. I'm not painting with a wide brush and saying everybody enjoys a particular product because they're a particular race. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that these companies know it, but these companies don't say it. They don't say it publicly. Again, very famously, I think it was last week, when it came to the business of McDonald's getting rid of their self-serve soft drink dispenser inside of all of their McDonald's restaurants. They called it something like, well, we're moving in a different direction, or they used some funny phrase that they could have just said, it just so happens that we're being robbed, and that the vast majority of all of the videos that people see in fast food restaurants happen to be minorities, blacks specifically, robbing us, or fighting our management, or complaining about the food, eating the food, and then wanting their money back. Very randomly, again, that was an actual interaction that I saw approximately a year ago. I happened to be inside of a Burger King because the line outside was too long. I just wanted a cheeseburger and I just wanted to leave. That was it. Again, I don't frequent Burger King, but that particular day I was hungry and I just wanted a cheeseburger and I just wanted to get in and get out. I never like going into those establishments for reasons just like this. You don't know, of course, who you're going to interact with. You don't know what's going on. And it just so happened that the individual creating the commotion was a white woman. And she was clearly attempting to rob the establishment. She paid for food. She went out, she left the establishment with the bag, went out to her car, ate it, and then came back and said, "You gave me the wrong meal. I want my money back." At which point, the management looked at her and said, "Then bring the food back." And she goes, "It's out in my car." She says, "Go get it." She goes, "I'm not going to because you gave me the wrong order, so I should be able to keep it. I want my money back." I mean, she was trying to rob the place, is basically what she was trying to do. It's theft. But that person was white. So again, I'm not saying that it's singular to a single race. It is a mentality, but it just so happens that the vast majority of these crimes are done by blacks, and they happen to be in inner city environments. Let me mention this too, and then I'm going to get back to the justice system aspect of this, because I think, again, this is a very interesting discussion, and this is an ongoing problem in our society, is you have individuals who will be murdered by a minority race, specifically, let's say in this case, blacks, or even illegal aliens who are not white. What will happen in many cases, and has happened in many cases in the United States, is the virtue signaling, the pacification, and the brainwashing of the victim's family is such that they end up actually defending their own family member's murderer. This has happened on endless occasions. Very famously, I can see her face. Again, I could look it up for this, but for the sake of brevity, I won't. There was a gal, I believe in Nebraska, white gal, and she was murdered by an illegal alien. Her body was found in a cornfield. She had been raped and choked to death or stabbed or whatever, and she was killed. The parents, again, basically came to the defense of the murderer, saying that if policies were better, this wouldn't have happened, that could have catered to this individual and helped them, and they were lost and they didn't mean it, and they forgive their daughter's killer. Guy's a stone cold killer, period. He was Mexican or whatever the hell he was, and that was it. But again, that's the parents of a slain daughter saying that and behaving that way. Also, very famously, just I believe last week, there was a young white gal who was murdered by a black guy. And the black guy, again, quick trial, admitted it. Of course, they had everything. There was no trial, basically. It was just like, okay, you did this. We know you did it. That's the end of it. The judge in the case ended up sentencing him to death, and rightfully so. But the parents of the slain daughter, the slain young white woman, came to the killer's defense and told the judge that your punishment of a death penalty is too harsh. Wrap your head around that. These people are everywhere. This is constant. So it's a familial problem as well, is that parents are not teaching their children because the parents don't know that there have to be consequences. And even when they are the victim of a lack of consequences, or they're the victim of a lack of vigilance, which is their own fault. But again, this is the societal brainwashing that is done on purpose to subvert our entire country and create constant civil wars between the individuals who legally, of course, live in our country, and then you flood it with criminals and illegal aliens, then you have an even bigger civil war. Because you have, unfortunately, people virtue signaling and trying to defend those illegal aliens and those criminals, and you have others who want them all gone, want them executed, or want them thrown in prison for breaking the law. But then you had this one, again, just very quickly. This is a particular case, again, having to do with, of course, corrupt judges, but it was from the Daily Mail, and it was titled, "NYC Woman Declined to Press Charges Against Subway Shover because she didn't want, to put another black man in jail," quote unquote. Weeks later, he allegedly killed a retired teacher, 76 years old, at the train station, at the same subway station. So this is what happens again when the justice system, when people virtue signal and they believe the left-wing ideology and the, you don't want to victim shame, and again, you don't want to put another black person in jail, and you don't want to be responsible for that because that looks bad. When people ignore the law and you ignore the consequences and accountability that the law is supposed to bring for everybody all of the time, it will back up on you. And if it doesn't back up on you physically, it's going to back up on somebody else physically. So much so that kind of a scenario right there happens with regularity. A judge lets out a convicted rapist and a murderer and says, well, let's rehabilitate them. They go into some rehabilitation center. They basically say, you don't need to be rehabilitated. You're a murderer and you're a rapist. You belong behind bars. The rehabilitation center cuts them loose because they're not a jail. Then the individual gets out. Then the individual kills and rapes somebody else. This happens constantly. Again, it's all of the time. But that's, again, the judicial breakdown and the law enforcement breakdown that exists also. This pacification also occurs, of course, as we know, within police departments. Very famously, again, 2 weeks ago or last week, whenever it was, the beginning of May, is the Washington, D.C. Police Department had a bunch of their employees get fired because the employees were manipulating race statistics based on crime. They were deleting them. They were manipulating all of these statistics because the people who, by and large, do all of the crime in D.C. happen to be black. I've brought it up before. You can get on your county's sheriff's department intake center, and you can look at all the different races of the individuals who are being detained. Some of these individuals are obviously black or Hispanic, and it will say under their race, it'll say unknown. It'll just say the word unknown, or it'll say white, when they're obviously not. This is a problem. This is a big issue. But when people, again, make excuses for that kind of unethical behavior and that unprofessional behavior, and again, I'm not even sure what else you would call it. It's statistics fraud. It's paper fraud. You're lying, basically. Certainly, again, for your own political ideology, whatever that is. Trying to, again, blame whites for everything and, again, engage in statistical manipulation and statistical fraud. But this happens. And this, again, is the much larger, wider ranging picture, is the dual justice system does exist. Individuals, again, can use racial slurs in one setting, and the entire police department can be pressured into arresting an individual because they use racial slurs. That's not a crime. But the corruption gets exposed in the middle of that. If such a thing happens, which it happens all of the time, and it has happened, of course, in recent years, very famously, with a number of different individuals standing up for themselves using racial slurs, and then the video gets posted online, and then the police department gets pressured to arrest somebody, and then the person who used the racial slurs gets arrested. Again, it's a play that's on replay all of the time. Because again, if it were the other way around, and if the shoe were on the other foot, there would be a different outcome. Now there's also this, and this should prove to people that this is not new, that all of this judicial corruption and law enforcement corruption and double standards from a societal aspect happen all of the time. I've been reading recently here the selected works of Cicero, a Roman philosopher, statesman, senator, so to speak, and he was also a prosecutor in the BC times, I might add. I believe he lived from I'm making this up, 130 BC to 50 BC, somewhere in there, maybe not that long. Either way, in 70 BC, he was, and this is right at the beginning of the book, in 70 BC, he was a prosecutor, and he was prosecuting a known criminal. He was a known criminal. Specifically, what had he done? I'm not entirely sure, but he was a known criminal. He belonged in jail, in their form of jail, if not, again, worse. And as a result of everybody already knowing about his crimes and them being, again, well-known and endless witnesses in the whole thing, the individual got off. How did the individual get off? They got off from the charges and were set free because of a corrupt judge who could be bought, and because the individual who was being prosecuted, who was the lawbreaker, had money. That was it. And to paraphrase Cicero, he basically said the same thing that everybody has said who has a brain in their skull, as he clearly did, which is you cannot live in a civil society when you have that level of corruption from the top, bottom, inside, and out. And to take it a step further, you can't maintain a civil society, which means you won't keep it. If you think you live in a civil society with that kind of behavior, I would go so far as to say that you're wrong. That we don't live in a civil society when you have that kind of corruption. Now, do we have that kind of corruption in the United States? Of course we do. It's everywhere. I have audio later to prove it. It's in every facet of our entire existence right now. And the reason that it's driving people mad, myself included to some extent, is because we can see it, because we're awake to it. There are people who are not awake to it. They're active participants in it, as a matter of fact, and they don't even seem to care. Now, to bring this back to ChudTheBuilder real quick, Dalton, let me get his name again real quick, Dalton Etherly, he has a Give, Send, Go page. I'm just going to read it for you so that you understand, again, what he's dealt with in the past. It's Help the Chud and His Family. Dear friends, supporters, and champions of free speech, my name is Dalton Etherly. I'm reaching out with a heavy heart, fighting to protect my family and my business. Just over 1 year ago, I started DLE contracting in Clarksville, Tennessee, out of sheer necessity. I was fired from my previous contracting job after Black Lives Matter activists targeted me over words I shared online, jokes and opinions they twisted to end my career. With no other way to support my family and my precious 2-year-old son, I poured everything into this small business, working tirelessly to provide for my family and build a future. But now that dream is under attack, not for the quality of my work, but for what I say online. I've shared mild jokes, unfiltered thoughts, and yes, sometimes I've used the N-word in what I thought was edgy, harmless humor. I know it's controversial, but it's my right to speak freely. For that, hundreds of people in my city are slandering my business, spreading lies to tear down everything I've worked for. The hate has escalated to a horrifying level. I've received death threats so vile they shake me to my core. People threatening to rape and murder me, and even targeting my innocent 2-year-old son with unspeakable cruelty. As a father, hearing these threats against my little boy breaks my heart and keeps me up at night. In the midst of this nightmare, a spark of hope emerged. I went viral on Instagram, gaining over 23,000 followers who connect with my story, my resilience, and my refusal to be silenced. People are beginning to stand up for American ideals and values. This platform is a chance to turn things around, but right now I'm broke. The slander has crushed my business's income, and I'm struggling to keep food on the table, pay our bills, and protect my family from this onslaught. I need your help to bridge this gap and rebuild. Your donation will go toward covering basic living expenses to keep my family secure, exploring legal options to fight the slander and protect my family from these vicious threats, find new ways to create a sustainable income for me and my family. This isn't just about money. It's about standing up to a mob trying to destroy not just my family's future over words, but our rights to free speech as a whole. If you've ever felt silenced, attacked, or punished for your beliefs, you know this fight. My business, only a year old, was born from necessity after I was canceled once before, and now I'm facing it again. With your support, I can rise above this hate, provide for my family, and prove that cancel culture won't break us. Every dollar, every share, every prayer, means the world to us. Thank you for standing with my family in this battle for freedom and survival. With gratitude, Dalton Etherly, a.k.a. ChudTheBuilder, unquote. Again, if a person wants to give to his Give, Send, Go, you most certainly can. I understand the point he's making. I get it. I fully get it. And he's right. He's 100% right. There is the element of cumulative risk, though, because he can't be a father for his son if he's going to inner city environments, throwing the N-word around a bunch of drunks, whites, blacks, Jews, Hispanics, whomever, and then expect something appropriate to occur on their end or even on his end. Free speech, absolutely, no doubt about it. But there are consequences, even to lawful behavior. He's raised approximately $74,000+ thus far on his Give, Send, Go page. Again, it'll probably go to legal fees without a doubt. But this is the game, and this is the dangerous game and the dangerous society that we live in. It's not that, again, you have to reprioritize particular things necessarily. Again, if it were me and I had a 2-year-old son and I was trying to put food on the table and I was trying to, again, start up a business or maintain a business, going to downtown Nashville, walking around stone cold sober, live streaming myself, calling people the N-word and getting in, confrontations with individuals and having people, again, come up and assault me, it's not what I would do. It's not what a lot of people would do. But like I said, I understand what he's doing. What he's doing is he's providing a slap in the face, metaphorically, and a reminder to people that you don't have to put up with degeneracy, that you don't have to put up with sinful behavior. Now, he's engaging in sinful behavior, of course, while exposing sinful behavior. I mean, I get it. But a person has to weigh the importance of a number of different things all at the same time. And it's not that, again, you have to give up your First Amendment right at the expense of providing for your family, or vice versa. Again, the Bolshevik playbook gets used on everybody. The right has learned how to use it from the left has learned how to use it from the right, and the left was taught by Jewish communists. They were the ones who created these Bolshevik tactics of hunting a person down where they work, contacting their employers in an attempt to get them fired, have individuals complain about them anonymously, start the whole, whatever they are, those stupid change.org surveys, and, all in an effort to get people fired. I mean, these games get played all of the time, and they happen constantly, too, throughout the entire legal profession. They happen within the education profession. They happen within every line of work. that when an individual, again, decides to speak freely, anonymously or not anonymously, online or even out in public, individuals always, again, will use their cell phones to basically gather pictures or video footage of the person, pop it into an AI system in an attempt to identify them, and then try to ruin their lives. Me personally, I've been of the aspect, or certainly of the opinion, that when people want to ruin their lives from their own behavior, they'll just do it themselves. You just give them enough room and they'll do it without any help from you. At the same time, and a person, again, does have to weigh this, is that if that particular individual is in a profession, for example, where their responsibilities are massive, or even, say, for example, they're working with minors, and the individual, again, that you're exposing either has a drug or alcohol problem, and this person just so happens to be working with minors, you might want to tell the employer that here's the behavior of the person that you've employed who happens to be working with minors. You might want to question them about this. You might want to at least, give them a little bit of a warning and a heads up. Because if something terrible happens, it might be a kid who's on the raw end of that stick based on the behavior that the person has exhibited in their personal life. Again, that's caring for society, I like to think, and that's certainly, again, shooting a warning shot over the individual's bow in an attempt to basically get them to change their behavior. But as we know, again, in many working environments, certainly the education business, among others, there's a double standard. That if an individual is engaging in a certain kind of behavior in their personal life that reflects poorly on their professional life, then that will either be tolerated or not tolerated, depending on how much that person is liked by the individual doing the employing. And therein lies the problem. Because that same behavior exists, and that same practice, as unethical as it is, that exists in the judicial system and in law enforcement as well. The two easiest crimes, I think, to charge anybody with for just about any reason whatsoever that would, of course, put anybody in some sort of legal peril to an extent is disorderly conduct and what's called nonviolent resistance. Nonviolent resisting arrest, basically. This is a term I'm hearing more and more and more. They're saying, well, they resisted arrest, but they did it nonviolently. It's a way for them to extend that particular charge and make it even broader. So that if you're asking questions, for example, while you're being detained and your hands are behind your back and you're not physically resisting, but you're asking questions, why am I being arrested? Why am I being arrested? That gives police officers the opportunity to basically say he was resisting arrest nonviolently. We're still charging him because that's still a charge that we get to throw at people and a fine and whatever else. But either way, that's our determination because that's our opinion. You have to understand, again, the law enforcement aspect of this. You don't have to tolerate it. Again, I don't like it and I don't tolerate it either. But I also know, in summary here, because I've spent almost 50 minutes on this, in summary, I also understand that we have to stand up for our own rights, but I also understand that I don't have to put myself in a situation or in a geographic area where the likelihood of my rights being deprived are likely or certainly increased dramatically. And that's not even to say that a person has to go to an inner city setting or downtown Nashville or wherever in some city to have your rights deprived. Your rights get deprived in a small town. Your rights get deprived not wanting to wear a mask in a grocery store when everybody else is insane. Again, the 2020 fiasco was another perfect example. That was a perfect example of where people could exercise their God-given rights and their constitutional rights, which are one and the same, and you could again push the system. And you could see how far the system would go. Well, we're a private business and we get to tell you to leave if you're not going to wear a mask, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave and blah, blah, blah. And then there were other stores who openly said, we can't force them to wear a mask. They're allowed to shop here, and we can't force them to wear a mask, like Hobby Lobby. Back in 2020 and 2021, very famously, Hobby Lobby had all their employees wearing masks. And if you didn't, there wasn't anything that they could do about it. But if you went into a Kroger's or you went into a grocery store and you weren't wearing a mask, they could throw you out. And then they could call management, and then they could call the police, and then there you have it. So it's discretion. But it's also knowing, again, what place is tyrannical and what place isn't. I understand what Dalton was doing. I mean, I get it. He's exposing a much larger, more insidious, deep problem that exists in our culture. And he's right. But even in that exposure, yeah, there's going to be consequences because there always are. So if you can weather the storm and you can deal with the consequences, then do it. But exposing that and again, exposing that corruption and exposing the fragility of society when it comes to name calling, that's not worth your life. It's not worth costing your life over. You can do it 1,000 different ways. But again, he's put himself in dangerous situations, but you have to keep in mind too, there's other situations that he hasn't put himself in that are far more dangerous. He hasn't gone into inner city Chicago and done that. He doesn't go into inner city Chicago, bounce around town, calling everybody the N-word, recording them, whatever. If he did that, he'd get killed. And he knows that. So he goes to more racially diverse places by and large. And he sometimes, again, doesn't even go by himself. He goes with people around him to basically, again, keep an eye out and a number of other things. But again, there's always going to be consequences to things like that. It doesn't mean, again, that you have to agree with his tactics like the poster said, but it also doesn't mean that you have to criticize him because of what he's actually exposing, which is a far more insidious problem. Okay, I'm going to move on now. And I want to mention this just geopolitically. I'm going to try to be brief because I've got a few education things that I want to bring up too. There's a lot of weird stuff going on right now. A lot of mixed messages. A lot of confusion. I know, it's warfare. I mean, I fully get it. There's a lot of different things happening. Of course, Donald Trump was in China, may still be by the time I air this here on Thursday afternoon. But, going to China and then saying that we're going to be great business partners, and then you bring the heads of these major companies and these CEOs to China with you, and it just so happens that the vast majority of those CEOs are Jewish. It's a bit alarming and a bit troubling. Even Fox News, of course, made the trip over there, as did a lot of other media personnel. And even Brett Baer was sort of jokingly and very casually commenting on all of the surveillance that exists. And they're almost trying to sell this to America like it's a good thing. All the flock cameras that exist everywhere in China, and how one of their media personnel was illegally parked for just a couple of minutes, and then before you know it, his phone rings and he's been fined $40 or $50 US because he was illegally parked because the cameras caught him illegally parked for a couple of minutes. And Brett goes, well, this is why people don't break the law here, because there are cameras everywhere, and if you break the law, or you jaywalk, or you do this or you do that, you instantly get fined. Well, that's a social credit score also, because that's what the fine is tied to. So again, when you have these companies and they're all meeting together in China at the same time, Americans should be concerned, even at face value. If it's a one-dimensional way of looking at it, it's a rather horrible way of looking at it. But again, that should bother people because we don't want to be like China. And unfortunately, everything that's introduced to America from a technological standpoint is and has been, I should say, already implemented in China. People are still debating the flock cameras here. Some city councils are immediately adopting them, and others don't. They sell them to people as a safety requirement under the blanket and umbrella of quote-unquote safety. Well, if someone robs you, then we can use flock cameras and we can track down who robbed you and then we'll catch them. I understand that that's worked, and it has worked, and it does work. But it's also used, again, illegally by individuals who are in charge of it to surveil people illegally. And that's a problem. you had a reporter asking Donald Trump before he took off for China, basically saying, okay, given the situation with Iran and everything that's happening, knowing full well that the media personnel doesn't understand what's really going on with Iran, but the simple fact again that they brought that up, and then they said, so in the backdrop of everything that's happening with Iran, is that motivating your thoughts having to do with the financial status of Americans right now? And Donald Trump very quickly said, I'm not thinking about the financial status of Americans. I'm focused on Iran and them not getting a nuclear weapon. That's my number one priority. Well, that can be taken a couple of different ways. Number one, again, at face value, it looks really insulting to Americans. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans are one-dimensional, and they're going to look at that one-dimensionally, and they're going to take offense to it. And I take offense to it to an extent. And so do, again, endless other people. Why would he say that? What do you mean he's not thinking about the financial status of Americans? Isn't that kind of his job? Isn't that what he's supposed to be doing? But at the same time, the flip side of that coin at that very quick comment has to do with what the long-term gain might be financially for Americans. I'm not just talking about a check in the mail. I'm talking about lower gas prices, the ability to hopefully find better jobs, higher paying jobs, things of that nature, or again, individuals within their current working environment getting paid more. That's ultimately, again, what Americans want, because what Americans don't want is they don't want to be insulted. They don't want their jobs to be taken for less money by illegal aliens and H-1B visas and the whole thing, and they don't want data centers, and they don't want more flock cameras, and they don't want to be like China. And they don't want to be gaslit by the Jewish lobby either. That's an ongoing huge issue as well. In fact, there was this, again, the whole gold statue at Mar-a-Lago thing of Donald Trump with his fist in the air. That was apparently donated to him by Jewish donors, and that's got a lot of people upset. Again, it's not a move I'd make. It seems a bit strange if somebody came to me and was like, hey, I got a gold statue. Do you want to put it on your property? I'd say no. And then if they said, well, it's been donated to you and here's the list of the names of the donors, I'd say no. But, he accepts it. So again, it's an odd look. It's a questionable look. Certainly, again, on the backdrop of how people are struggling financially to even fill up their car right now. Again, gas prices have been high before. They were high for 4 years and no one seemed to complain about it. They were high during Obama and even higher during Obama, and people again seem to forget about that. But even so, I understand the multiple dimensions of the particular arguments, and there are some things, again, that just look like they're in poor taste. So, again, that's my 2 cents and just my quick opinion on that. But a couple of other posts here. This was from the Revolver. And again, this is interesting too, and I don't know where to take this either and how to take this, but there's a lot of talk, as we all know right now, about basically not allowing countries, whether it be America or even European countries, into taking in illegal migrants, quote unquote. Now, they're not migrants, they're invaders. But Marco Rubio apparently gave a speech to a bunch of individuals affiliated with the UN and basically said that we're cracking down on UN agencies that are working with NGOs that are funding all of this illegal migration, and it's not going to happen, and we're not dealing with it, and we're not putting up with it anymore, and XYZ. That's essentially my summary of his statement at this particular conference. And again, it's probably a speech, again, that even the article says wouldn't have been a speech that would have been given during the Biden administration, certainly not in Europe. But apparently when Rubio was done with these comments, saying that we're done taking in illegal aliens, we're done with this migration stuff, it's not going to happen anymore, a lot of these Europeans stood up and applauded. Again, it's crushing Europe too. But this is on purpose. This is a giant plan, again, to flood all of these nations, ours included, and then ultimately destroy it from the inside. Higher costs of living, crime out of control, the whole thing. Again, it's the Obama play. He did it throughout his entire administration, and he did it, again, without the mainstream media even really talking a lot about it, which means they were in on it too. Same with Fox News. They were all in on that too. So again, I think the larger concern too, beyond, of course, illegal quote unquote immigration and migration, has to do with the security state. It has to do again with the technocrats who do what they do and how they slow roll it in the United States. The difference is that we at least have a say to some extent. And unfortunately, in many places, we don't have a say, which is unfortunate as well. Because again, a lot of these people in these positions, whether they certainly be local government who are making these decisions and allowing such technological tools to be implemented, regardless of what the public says, they never put it up to a vote, they never ask the public, and then they just vote because they get some kind of a kickback. So that's problematic, and that's going to continue to be problematic, I think, going forward, but I'm against all of it. I don't like the idea of flock cameras whatsoever. I mean, think about it. Everybody already has a flock camera. It's your cell phone. If someone is being robbed, pull out your cell phone and start recording the robbery. Most businesses have security cameras anyway. Most homes have Ring doorbells anyway. To some extent, again, people are surrounding themselves with this surveillance state on their own accord, not knowing that that is also part of the issue. It's normalizing that kind of behavior in a very deliberate and slow roll kind of way. But again, this is the difficult balance, and this is the back and forth of all of this that gets a lot of people upset and a lot of people confused, a lot of people angry, and I get it. I mean, I fully understand it. I don't necessarily have a ready answer or a solution to any of it, but I know it continues to roll out, and it just doesn't look good. Of course, you bring in the business of data centers. That's pretty much what they're for also, is to just store all of this information and keep it stored for however long and then potentially use it against somebody in the future. If that's the Chinese play of what they do over in China, I don't want any part of it here in the United States. There was also this, which is absolutely rich that this is happening. I can't believe how easy it is to flush the cockroaches out of the walls on this one. But J.D. Vance, of course, and Mehmet Oz are allegedly putting together a fraud task force having to do with health fraud and Medicare fraud and Medicaid fraud and all of that stuff. All the Leering Center Somali stuff. They're not saying Somalis, but let's face it, they are a big part of it as well, if not the vast majority of it. I just find it funny that they're doing this now when they could have been doing this years ago. They could have done it in the first administration, but apparently it wasn't on the docket back then. But of course now you have all of these current administrators and politicians and individuals in current governments, certainly at the state level, specifically in Ohio, as Ohio's being referenced consistently throughout some of these media hearings and media gatherings where these announcements are being made. And now, again on X, Mike DeWine's coming out and saying, oh, we're going after fraud all the time. And Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State, same thing. Oh, I've been going after fraud the whole time. Let's put out a video and tell people what job I've been doing this whole time. You haven't been arresting anybody. Check your inbox. You've been getting kickbacks. DeWine's been a part of the problem. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time. And of course, in typical fashion, if a coat is long enough, Vivek Ramaswamy's going to grab at those coattails. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. He met with Mehmet Oz the other day and he goes, don't worry, when I become Ohio governor, I'm going to go after this too, and I'm going to make this my number one priority. Bullshit. No, you won't. It could be done right now. There are politicians in office right now who claim to be conservatives. These arrests should be quick, swift, immediate, and on everybody's local news channel on a night in and night out basis. All of the time, nationwide. But again, that's not happening. Now, I'm glad that this is happening. I'm glad that they're taking away these Medicare, Medicaid licenses that apparently these particular individuals have had, and apparently that's happening. But they're referring to that as incentives, that they're de-incentivizing these individuals. They're basically, again, making it harder for them to obtain these licenses so that they can't engage in Medicare or Medicaid fraud. I have a better idea. How about you not only go after the so-called incentives, how about you just lock people up? What about that? Locking people up for extended periods of time and then letting that entire quote-unquote community fully understand who's been locked up and why, that's real deterrence. And that will work, and that will help. It'll actually cause those individuals to self-deport. They might go back to Somalia where they belong. That would be nice. But you have to arrest people, and you have to do it publicly. Having more committees and having more meetings in this day and age with awake Americans makes it look like you're going to hide something. Or you're just going to kick the can down the road a little bit longer until certain people get into office, and then by the time they get into office after the primary a year from now, well, people will have forgotten about it and it won't matter. I'm telling you, there have to be arrests. You have to close down these buildings, and I know some of them have been closed down, and that's great. I understand the businesses have been upended. That's great. Where are the people and the criminals, though, who were working within those so-called fraudulent businesses? Are they in jail, or were they able to just walk away? Again, you've heard me bring it up here before. There's so much crime, and there's so much fraud, and there are yet only so many prosecutors. And there's only so many judges. This has to be fast-tracked. And if that is a part of what the federal government is doing in an effort to, again, fast-track these prosecutions, which would lead to, again, imprisonment and then deportation, where you take away whatever citizenship status that they actually have if they came here, again, not being born here, but came here illegally or even through legal channels, and you still break the law, deport them. If that's happening again at the federal level, and this is being built at the federal level for that to take place, I say, great, I'm on board 100%. But what I don't believe for a minute is all of the sudden when the federal government says, here's what we're going to do, we're going after fraud, and then all of the sudden you have these local state politicians, certainly in the state of Ohio, go, yeah, we agree with you because we've been going after fraud the whole time. To that, I call bubkiss on that. There's no way that that's the case. They're just saying that to save face and to make it look like they've been doing their job this entire time. Who believes that? Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, again, is Captain Haitian. He's been bringing Haitians into Ohio ever since he showed up. So, yeah. I don't buy it, not in the slightest. Dave Yost just quit. Again, he quit last Thursday, as the state's AG because he's got to be probably overwhelmed with all of this. And Mike DeWine could easily, as I've laid out the law here on the show previously, I think on Monday's episode, he could very easily make a declaration where the AG goes after this kind of fraud instantly, quickly, and swiftly. Has he done that? Not to my knowledge. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, Vivek's going to be all over it. Yeah, I bet he will. It's not an incentive problem. We don't have to work on incentives and find new incentives. No. You have to make it impossible for these people to get kickbacks this way. And then you have to go after the groups and the subgroups that taught them how to do it. Because these groups are left-wing, they're liberal, and they happen to be Jewish in many cases. Somalis didn't come over here and just learn this by themselves. They didn't just pick it up in an airport flyer someplace that this is how you take advantage of the American system. Illegally, by the way. It's all illegal. They were taught this. They were taught how to do this on our soil or over on theirs. And then they made their way over here and then they implemented it. Again, it's exhausting, but something has to give here. It has to give eventually. There's also this, unrelated to Somali fraud, but certainly Israeli fraud and war crimes, as a matter of fact. The Israelis are dropping white phosphorus on the Lebanese and spraying white phosphorus on Lebanese farms and farmers and cattle. And it's a poison. They're literally gassing the Lebanese. This is a war crime. No one's talking about this. Give this audio a listen, which of course came with video, but give this audio a listen in 3, 2, 1.
I wanted to share with you the hypocrisy of the Western media. Look at Reuters. They're calling this plumes of thick smoke were poured from Israeli planes onto southern Lebanon. This is white phosphorus, one of the most dangerous chemical agents used in warfare. It basically burns you from the inside out if you breathe it in, and if it lands on the ground, it creates fire and burns everything that it comes into contact with. While we're on the subject of white phosphorus, the Lebanese Ministry of Agriculture has just released some very important numbers about what's happening to the land and the crops and the agriculture in the south. The Israelis have also, in addition to white phosphorus, sprayed glyphosate, which is a highly toxic herbicide that contains the chemical Roundup, which is banned in several countries. They've sprayed it on crops in South Lebanon. And also the infrastructure, the irrigation, all these essential components for agriculture have been damaged by the Israeli aggression. The crops themselves, citrus, banana, and also very precious olive trees, sometimes thousands of years old, destroyed, burned to the ground. So it's really tragic what's going on. In addition to, it seems, according to the report, that they have killed about 1.8 million livestock. That's chickens and sheep and goats and cows that belong to these farmers. About 70% of the farmers in the south have been severely hurt by the aggression. Also added to this, which is very sad, they have destroyed 29,000 beehives. And from another source, I know that 2 of the most important beekeepers in Lebanon were assassinated, targeted and assassinated. So what is happening is very tragic. It's really a form of ecocide, and therefore this is not, to be defined or to be called war. This is more like in the realm of a war crime.
Now, of course, watch. Someone from the Israeli government will come out and say that the cows are a part of Hezbollah and that the bees are terrorists who hate Jews or whatever the hell. I mean, these people are insane. And it's the same playbook and the same strategy that they engage in century after century after century. They did this during the Holodomor. That event that caused tens of millions of people to be starved to death and assassinated and murdered in cold blood. Because this is what they do. They starve people out, they crush their food source, and then they shoot them. This is an old Zionist, Jewish tactic, communist tactic that has been used time and time again, paid for by, you guessed it, American tax dollars. Again, remember, if it were anybody else doing that, they would be bombed into oblivion. But the IDF gets to do it and then make an excuse for it, and then everybody's just supposed to believe the excuse. And of course, their excuse is, and this is actually real, the excuse that they've given media outlets like Al Jazeera and The Guardian and Reuters is that they use white phosphorus in their artillery shells. That's it. So the smoke that you see in the sky and that you see it just billowing over their farmland, it's just residue from the artillery shells that they've shot. And everybody's just supposed to believe that. Again, they lie because it's a part of their DNA. I don't know what else to say. But something has to give because their crimes could not be more obvious. Now moving on into education, and speaking of crimes that are obvious, how about some child abuse? Again, par for the course in the education business, and here's a perfect example of how they behave when they get caught. Again, they basically say, don't look here, we've already handled it, and parents don't need to know, and even if you're the victim and you're the victim's parent, we're not going to tell you, we're just going to keep everything hush-hush. This piece of audio you're going to hear is from a school board meeting back in April. And this is from Lyon County School District, specifically involving Fernley Intermediate School. This is out of Nevada, if I'm not mistaken. And it says the following here: in April 2026, a substitute teacher named James Pellew, or Pellew, something, at Fernley Intermediate School in Lyon County or Leon County, Nevada, allegedly grabbed two students, including an 11-year-old boy, by the neck in a shaking and choking motion while demonstrating his disciplinary approach. He was fired by the district, arrested on felony child abuse neglect charges, and the incident was reported to the Lyon County Sheriff's Office. The mother of one of the victims, Darlene Capps, publicly spoke out, including at a Lyon County School District Board meeting, about the school's response. She claimed the school did not immediately contact parents or police after the incident, only sending the sub home, and that she had to file the police report herself. Her comments at the board meeting went viral on social media. Here they are in 3, 2, 1.
On April 20th, my youngest son was assaulted by a substitute teacher at Fernley Intermediate School. To summarize, my son went into the substitutes class after lunch around 12 p.m. The children swapped classrooms at that time every day. The substitute introduced himself as Mr. P. While he was telling the class how he runs a classroom, he told the children that their necks were like chicken necks and he could choke them and break them. He walked behind my 11-year-old boy who was sitting at his desk listening. He wrapped his hands tightly around his neck and squeezed. Then he shook him violently. My son cried. The children sat in the classroom and waited for recess, and then they got help. They spoke to the other teacher and she sent them to the office to write report. My son wrote his report and asked to call me. The office staff told him no. She said the principal would call me. My son was sent to another class. About an hour later, I received a phone call. Mr. Cooper, the principal, called me and tiptoed around the events with a substitute. I had to ask him directly, did he put his hands around my son's neck and shake him? He said yes. I asked, did you call the police? He said no. I told him I was going to call them. He asked me to wait. I said no, and that I was going to handle it. I hung up on him and I called 911 and asked for a deputy to meet me at the school. A report was made and I took my son home. We followed up with urgent care and then the ER and urgent care again just yesterday. My son is in constant pain, headaches every morning, headaches every night. He has a cervical sprain, which is whiplash, and a concussion. He cannot return to school until next week at the earliest. He is missing soccer and other activities too. Here are the problems. The delay in reporting by a mandated reporter meant the marks around my son's neck had faded before photos could be taken. My son was not seen by the nurse. My son was not permitted a phone call home. The substitute was sent home instead of detained. Dozens of children lost their sense of safety that day as this event happened in 2 separate classes to 2 separate children, one of them being my son, the other one being in the other class. I was assured, and the principal was aware of both of those incidents, had reports from several children. I was assured the protocol was followed. If that is true, then we have some big problems. We need to find out how this man passed the checks in place to be around children, and we need to fix that. We need mandated reporters that should report immediately. Children who have been victims of violence should be seen by the nurse. Victims of assault should be allowed to call their parent. Where is the line? Because my child was strangled instead of stabbed, he was dismissed. Because his injuries were internal instead of external, he was denied help. Who felt that they had the right to triage my son and send him back to class? All students in those classrooms need someone to tell them what happened was not okay. They should be given free counseling. There should be financial help and support for victims of violent crimes in schools and their families to pay for doctors and therapists. My son and other children experienced violence in my hometown at school, and it needs to change.
Thank you for your comments. Would you like to submit that?
Yes.
Wait a second. You mean to tell me that people in the education business who are mandated reporters don't immediately report child abuse? This is the first time I'm hearing it. I'm laying it on thick, I know. But again, how many stories of this exist on a day in and day out basis, let alone the ones, of course, that are never reported and never make their way to even the local media, let alone national media. This happens daily. Daily. It's impossible that school employees don't see abuse take place at the hands of other school employees and then don't report it the moment that it happens. It happens daily within every school district in America all the time. Don't know what else to say, but that's a lawsuit. That's a massive lawsuit. Here's the other thing, of course, that never happens. School districts never to rarely to never investigate themselves and then hold people accountable for not reporting abuse. It doesn't happen. So if you have an organization like a school district that doesn't do the proper thing at the outset and then do the very next and only thing that they should do after that, which is investigate who screwed up and who intentionally hid the information and hid the abuse, and then fire them, charge them, of course, it's a misdemeanor, but you charge them anyway criminally for not reporting abuse. You can even do jail time, along with a massive fine, loss of licensure, your pension, the whole thing. If they don't go to the wall with it every single time, well, then people are going to keep doing it, which is why it keeps happening. It's the old meme. We're here again, and we're experiencing all of this again because you didn't hang them the first time. Again, there's a theme here, and it's constant. Here's another example, although this one is kind of cool. A sexual predator who's a male school teacher ended up getting catfished by students themselves. They flat out caught one of their own teachers on purpose, intentionally, to get him arrested, and it worked. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
A Huron middle school teacher is on unpaid leave tonight, accused of sending nude pictures to someone he thought was a 14-year-old girl.
And according to court documents, it wasn't a girl, but a teenage boy who made a fake Snapchat account and was catfishing him. Kettleland's Dan Santella joins us now with a closer look at this unusual case. Dan?
Zachary Katarabek stands accused of 2 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, along with 2 counts of solicitation of a minor. He's scheduled to be in court in January when he'll have to respond to the charges. For years, Zach Katarabek was trusted to teach students in the Huron School District. But in May, court documents say a 12-year-old girl told a friend the teacher had added her and messaged her on Snapchat, which made her uncomfortable. That friend responded by making a catfish or fake account posing as a 14-year-old girl named Kate. He added Katarabek on the social media app. The 2 exchanged numerous messages. Court documents say when Kate said she was 14, Katarabek responded, quote, "Oh, so only 4 more years," and a winking face. The documents also say Katarabek made sexual comments and sent photos of his genitalia. When investigators confronted Katarabek, he admitted speaking with the minors on Snapchat and sending them 4 pictures of his penis after Kate told him she was underage. Tonight, Katarabek is still listed as a middle school teacher on the Huron School District's website. However, the school board took unanimous action yesterday on the status of his employment.
To change Zachary Katarabek's administrative leave from paid to unpaid. Is there any discussion or comments? Okay, seeing none, we will vote. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Dan Santella, Kettleland News. Today I received an emailed statement from Huron School District Superintendent Craig Steinhoff. It says in part, quote, "The Huron School District is communicating with its attorney and is cooperating with law enforcement. All policies, procedures, and laws are being followed."
That was from 2024. December 2024 is when he got caught, but I'm bringing it up because I think that's an interesting strategy. If you catfish individuals who work within the education system after they make inappropriate comments, you'll catch them. And then again, they'll either go to jail, they'll be fired, certainly, lose their licensure, and even be charged as a sex offender and convicted as a sex offender. As it turns out, this Zach guy he was convicted last year in June of 2025 in Beadle County, South Dakota. But he apparently didn't do any jail time, at least there's none mentioned here. But he is registered as a sex offender on the South Dakota Sex Offender Registry. So little tip out there for any of the middle school, high school students, or even parents if you wanted to. If you know of a pedophile in a particular school district, try to catfish them. And again, I bet it works, because these people are stupid and they, of course, can't be cured. So there's that. There's also this one. This was out of Canada, and this had to do with apparently Muslim teachers espousing their Muslim faith to Canadian children in Canadian classrooms, and that's apparently not allowed. Now, you would think, given the current state of Canada, that would be allowed because some of them are crazy up there. Certainly, they're politicians and people who run their school districts, but as it turns out in Quebec, regarding this particular behavior and this school system and apparently what was said in the classroom, it's not allowed, which is good. So give this quick little news story a listen here in 3, 2, 1. And as it turns out, the licenses of these 11 teachers was just revoked this month of this year. So here's the audio to that story.
Religion has no business in our schools. And what happened in Bedford was terrible on so many levels in terms of protecting our children. I'm satisfied. We don't want these teachers around our children.
11 teachers have now permanently lost their teaching licenses following the scandal at Bedford School. The school came under investigation in 2024 after allegations that a group of teachers created what the officials described as a toxic climate of fear and intimidation. Government investigators raised concerns about physical and psychological mistreatment of students, the teaching of religion inside classrooms, and teachers who failed to follow Quebec's curriculum, including science and sex education. Those teachers were suspended with pay until now. The new report says the school changed significantly, saying, quote, "The children smile now, they enjoy school."
On était sous le choc. Il y a un avant et un après, ça c'est sûr. Il y a un avant et un après pour l'école Bedford.
But the report also reveals how deep the problems have become. Investigators identified 38 cases of what they called non-conformities in the way the curriculum was being taught. And out of 30 teachers reviewed, only 10 had lesson planning fully aligned with provincial standards.
Religion has no business in our schools. And what happened in Bedford was terrible on so many levels in terms of protecting our children. I'm satisfied. We don't want these teachers around our children.
The report points out that the situation at Bedford exposed broader weaknesses that could exist in other schools too, and puts a strong focus on Quebec values, including secularism and the importance of speaking French at school. Both the Education Ministry and the union representing the teachers declined to comment.
Declined to comment because they got caught red-handed. It's that simple. The school teachers were probably saying things like, you're an infidel if you don't convert to the Muslim faith and convert to Islam or whatever, then, you're going to get killed eventually, and that's part of Sharia law and XYZ and blah, blah, blah. Again, as it turns out, they were African Muslims. And it said again here that they were a part of what they referred to as a dominant clan. Again, many of North African and Maribi descent, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, created a toxic environment. Shocking. Allegations included introducing Islamist religion concepts, practices into classrooms, prayers, resisting the curriculum, and physical and psychological intimidation of students and staff, and influence from a local mosque. There you go. Don't say they're not targeting the children, ladies and gentlemen, because if they're not teaching the subject, what are they teaching them? That's the question everybody should always ask. And if they're not teaching them the subject, well, then it's time for them to go. And that's what's happened here. Okay, on to jab-related things. Two health notes here. Number one, of course, Dr. Marty Makary has resigned as the FDA commissioner earlier this week, a couple days ago, after about 13 months. There are a lot of reasons for him leaving. A lot of this has to do with bureaucracy, as one might expect, and it's not even that he's at fault. It says one of the reasons is that there was a policy clash over fruit-flavored vaping products, or e-cigarettes, and that Makary opposed their approval due to concerns about appeal to young people and nicotine addiction risks, and the administration moved forward with approvals anyway, angering him enough that he chose to resign rather than defend the decision. Seems like he took a pretty good stance on that one, no doubt about it. Let's see. He also tried to navigate traditional Republican anti-overregulation views and pharma biotech industry's interests and Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again agenda. And this left him apparently angering multiple sides. He received criticism from anti-abortion groups for not imposing stricter limits on the abortion pill mifepristone. I'm saying that right. Again, it's basically a mail-order drug that shows up, and abortions at home. Absolutely terrible. Let's see. Broader frustrations with his management style, leadership clashes with the agency and administration, and ongoing turmoil at HHS, FDA, including staff turnover and unfinished initiatives. Again, this is messed up, because this is how deep and insidious the FDA, CDC, and all of it is. So much so that you had a whistleblower, a CIA whistleblower, testify the other day in a oversight committee in the Senate. And I listened to a great deal of it, and it was basically, again, filled with a whole lot of half-truths. And I'm going to play some audio from his opening statement here. Now, he's 100% right that Anthony Fauci knew about the COVID shots. He knew, again, that this wasn't some lab leak, quote unquote, but it was really a lab intentional. And again, this is where I differ with Rand Paul on many things, because Rand Paul was kind of running cover for the whole virology lie, as he tends to do. And he said, again, if it was a leak, was it a known leak? The fact is that when they use that term leak, that's not really the truth. That's not what they mean. What they mean is, and of course he won't say it, but what they did is they just created a poison in a lab, and then they injected it into individuals, or they created, again, the bioweapon vaccine itself, and they mass-produced it. So that, again, it would be distributed within endless other forms of vaccination, enough to create a story, and then enough to create a panic, and then enough to usher in a so-called solution. But as even the whistleblower laid out, which is public knowledge at this point, they ran the entire 2020 agenda, the whole COVID lie, in a predetermined scenario, in a so-called fictional pandemic scenario where Anthony Fauci openly participated in it and attended that open session where they ran through, again, this so-called fictional scenario. This was all pre-planned, which makes it premeditated murder, which is a crime. So again, if you're going to go after Anthony Fauci, you don't go after him for perjury. That's nice and all, but you can just go after him for murder. Again, people got kickbacks. They got awards after the fact for pushing all of this out. And it was all intentional. No other way to put it. So here's part of his opening statement here. It's about 5 minutes long or so. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Dr. Fauci's role in the cover-up was intentional. Dr. Fauci influenced the analytical process and findings by leveraging his position to ensure the IC consulted with a conflicted list of curated subject matter experts, public health officials, and scientists. This included some of the authors of the paper, The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2, and other public health experts who have been in his orbit for the last 20 plus years. Some of the scientists were part of the Biological Sciences Experts Group, or the BSEG, an office of Director National Intelligence Advisory Body, whose members often receive considerable funding from NIAID and public health agencies. The BSEG scientists influenced national laboratory WMD research, policy decisions, finished analysis, and other intelligence matters, creating misaligned incentives and conflicts of interest, as well as counterintelligence issues. Since 2006, the BSEG consulted part-time on biodefense issues for the IC, while conducting government-funded research and holding academia positions, as well as maintaining roles in public health institutions and serving as members in the National Academy of Science. They receive funding from NIAID and other agencies for vaccine research, USAID's PREDICT project, the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. It even worked with Chinese scientists on coronavirus and other pathogen studies pursuing vaccines. There was no oversight monitoring how this web of relationships influenced research, policy, and public health in any holistic way for over 20 years. In fact, several of the BSEG scientists helped Dr. Fauci rewrite definitions of gain of function in 2015 to lift a funding pause on dangerous research. Still others participated in planning Event 201 in 2019. This was a coronavirus pandemic tabletop exercise, curiously similar to the events that played out during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was attended by Dr. Fauci and individuals with IC ties like former DNI Avril Haines. The CIA and DNI analytic managers responsible for examining the origin of COVID made decisions inconsistent with the conclusions of subject matter experts and analytical tradecraft, consistently favoring the theory of zoonosis or natural origin. Following the CIA's COVID relook that culminated in 2023, the CIA retaliated against analysts supporting the lab leak hypothesis. CIA analysts were not bribed. The analysts that supported the 2023 lab leak conclusion took every administrative measure available to them to address their deep concerns regarding the analytic integrity of their finished intelligence. CIA managers retaliated against them for their refusal to agree with management's middle-of-the-night anonymous rewrite of the analysis, which changed the assessment to a non-call judgment. Dr. Anthony Fauci's influence over the IC's COVID origin analysis and the witting and unwitting role some BSEG scientists and IC personnel played in the cover-up exposed why this issue is of deep concern. Failure to address the United States government's inability to differentiate between public health and biodefense and the oversight-resistant ecosystem of life science actors has been fertile ground for increasingly dangerous continental United States gain-of-function research, as well as similar research conducted in U.S. government-supported labs abroad. Post-9/11 changes in public health and biodefense roles and responsibilities have blurred the lines between scientists, the military, the intelligence community. It has resulted in a deliberately opaque and excessively redundant biodefense research policy and financial infrastructure, seemingly intended to escalate bureaucratic bloat. This is a national security crisis caused by the inability to provide real oversight.
Now, again, a couple of interesting things about kind of the aftermath of this. Number one is during the hearing, no Democrats were present. Not a single one. There may have been, I want to say 4 Republicans, maybe 5. Josh Hawley was there. A female was there. Britt, I think is her last name. Ron Johnson was there. Rand Paul was there. There may have been another one. But Ron Johnson was actually asking the best questions, I thought. Either way, the sad part, not just beyond Democrats not being there, of course, because they were in on it and getting kickbacks as a result of playing along, but Republicans played along too. Because in 2020, the American people were saying, hello, this is fraudulent. We know this is fraudulent. We're not complying. Where are you? And they were nowhere to be found because, again, Republicans were getting kickbacks from all of this nonsense also. They were in on it too. But unfortunately, the strategy that they always use, and Democrats do the same thing, is they always end up saying things like, well, we were all tricked. We were all lied to. This is shocking. This is just shocking. All this new information is just shocking. No, it's not. None of it's shocking. It was obvious that it was a crime. It was obvious that it was intentional. It was obvious that it was a cover-up to a great deal of us. But remember, those of us who were shouting about it at the top of our lungs were the ones who were maligned. We were the ones who were ostracized. We were the ones who were ignored. Well, they can't possibly be taken seriously because they're just citizens. What do they know? Again, that's what government would say, but government was in on it. So they would say that about the average citizen who knows exactly what's happening. Again, I'm glad this is being exposed. I'm glad that all of this is taking place, and it would be great to get Anthony Fauci back in the halls of Congress and to, again, receive a subpoena to testify and respond to these claims from this whistleblower, because we know what he would say. He would say the whistleblower's lying. He would say he doesn't know where he's getting this information and none of it's true and XYZ. I mean, that's what Anthony Fauci would say because he's a pathological liar. But I agree with Rand Paul again. He wants Anthony Fauci's head on a stake, and I'm all for that, and I think most everybody is. But there has to be an arrest. Exposing this information for the public is fine and dandy. But if there are laws that are being broken, then what are the consequences for breaking those laws? That's what we haven't seen yet. And that's what has to happen. Again, the former CIA whistleblower, in typical fashion, and you get a little PTSD rather when you hear things like this, because it's prevalent within every working environment when you've been a whistleblower, is again, they're all treated exactly the same way. Individuals start whispering in the working environment, people are retaliated against, people are fired, they're forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, and then you have a great deal of the people within these working environments, specifically within his former working environment, who just went along to get along. That was basically it. They had a mortgage payment. They just bought something fancy that they had to pay for, whatever it was. And they were just like, well, just keep your head down and just do your job. And yes, there's a lot of shady behavior and people are getting kickbacks and people are starting to question a few things, but don't question too much, because if you do, you're going to lose your job and they're going to find out and XYZ. I mean, he laid it all out in the whole hearing. And it's terrible the way that moral human beings are treated within these environments when they come across wrongdoing. But again, it's government. And if you're getting a check from government, whether it be local, state, or federal, well, you're going to have corruption. And you're going to come across it. And if you call it out, you're going to be retaliated against. Again, it's as common as apple pie and hot dogs on the 4th of July. But that's the way that it goes, and it's terrible. And until that changes, ladies and gentlemen, nothing's going to change. Why have whistleblower laws? Why have anti-retaliation laws if you're not going to follow them and they're not going to be enforced? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for listening as always. Have a great weekend, and I will catch you on Monday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care, and God bless.